I can't believe this is happening again. In this video, I'm going to break down the Vancouver Canucks' last 4 games, including yesterday's clash with Artūrs Šilovs and the Pittsburgh Penguins. But first, let's talk about Game 4 against the Dallas Stars. The Stars have made it all the way to the Western Conference Final for the past 3 years in a row. So, in other words, they're one of the best teams in the NHL. And that was pretty obvious to start this one. Dallas came out swinging, but Thatcher the puck snatcher Demko stood tall and stopped everything they threw his way. Until Elias Pettersson deflected the puck into his own net. Man, PD just can't seem to catch a break. 1-0 Stars.
Rantanen scores!
2-0 Stars. The second period was a different story though, and it all started with 2 great plays by Evander Kane. First, he lobbed a perfect, albeit a little lucky, breakaway pass to Filip Chytil, and Chytil buried it, cutting the Stars' lead to 1. Then, less than 30 seconds later, Kane was back on the ice, pressuring hard in on the forecheck, ended up drawing a penalty, and on the ensuing power play, Brock Boeser scored. 2-2. But the Canucks weren't done there. Less than 90 seconds after tying the game, they took the lead, thanks to the speedster Max Sasson, who was playing in his first game of the season after being called up from Abbotsford to replace Braden Coots. And don't worry, nothing is wrong with Coots. Management just felt that another year in junior would be best for his development, and I agree. After all, he is literally just a kid. Anyway, 3-2 Canucks. Speaking of new faces in the lineup, Linus Karlsson was making his season debut in this one, taking the spot of Jonathan Lekkerimäki, who was a healthy scratch. Which means the line of Arshdeep Bains, Max Sasson, and Linus Karlsson was reunited for the first time since winning the Calder Cup in Abbotsford last June. And they looked incredible. AHL, NHL, it doesn't seem to matter. The chemistry between these 3 is undeniable. And even though on an individual level, none of them have yet to prove themselves as a bona fide NHL regular, this line combination might just ensure that all 3 of them stay with the big club for quite a while. But believe it or not, the Calder Cup line wasn't the reason I had drool on my chin while watching this tilt. That was Conor the Gargoyle Garland's fault. He was moved up to play on the first line with Elias Pettersson, and man did he make the best of that opportunity. He was running around like a mini McDavid out there. And look at the goal he scored. It was absolutely beautiful. 4-2 Canucks. Dallas tried to mount a comeback in the third, but 20% of their remaining time was wiped out by 2 penalties drawn by Evander Kane. They did manage to get 1 back, but it didn't matter because thanks to some fearless blocks from Elias the Alien Pettersson, they couldn't get another. Captain Quinn sealed the deal with an empty netter, and the Canucks left Texas with a 5-3 win over the Stars. The second half of Vancouver's first back-to-back of the season was Game 5 against Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks. But just like the night before, the Canucks found themselves down 2-0 after the first 20 minutes. It wasn't Kevin Lankinen's fault though. He was locked in all night. We are seriously so lucky to have 2 great goalies to watch on a regular basis. Demko and Lankinen are going to save this team a ton of headaches this year, and will probably be the reason I still have hair by Game 82. In fact, Lank the Tank was so good that 2 goals were all the Blackhawks could muster up in this one. And just like the game against Dallas the night before, the Canucks woke up and took control in the second period. But this time it started with the Petterssons. First, it was Marcus MP3 Pettersson hitting the crossbar. Then Elias EP40 Pettersson hit the crossbar. Then Elias DPD25 Pettersson drew a penalty, and on that ensuing power play, the birthday boy Jake DeBrusk scored. 2-1 Chicago. Then the Calder Cup connection came in clutch to tie the tilt at 2s just in time for the third. 2-2. Garland was an offensive chemist, Hronek was a defensive presence, Sherwood is soon to be an expensive menace, Sasson has a relentless engine, Teddy Bluger was back in the lineup, so that's good. The game stayed tied through the third period and overtime, so for the first time this season, the Canucks went to a shootout. Unfortunately for the Blackhawks, Lankinen had already decided that he wasn't going to let any more pucks get by him, so it was really just a question of which player was going to win the game for Vancouver. It was Boeser. The Canucks won 3-2. Also, I'd be an absolute Jason Dickinson if I didn't mention how well Elias Pettersson played in this game. He was doing everything everywhere all at once, but somehow didn't score. But you just knew something was coming. Which brings us to Game 6 against the Washington Capitals.
Pettersson scores!
Less than a minute into the game, thanks to a heads-up pass from Conor Garland, PD scored his first of the season to put the Nucks up 1-0. Then, while the Capitals' crease was covered in chaos, Tyler Myers, in his natural habitat, plucked the puck out of the muck and tucked home his first of the season to double the Nucks' lead. 2-0 Whale Team. And like the little snitches they are, the Capitals challenged this goal for goaltender interference, but obviously it didn't work. Instead, they were given a delay of game penalty for delaying the game, and on the ensuing power play, Vancouver scored again. This time it was Kiefer the Beaver Sherwood. Nice. 3-0 Canucks. Tom Wilson, with a full diaper, tried to take his little baby anger out on Conor Garland, but missed him completely. Unfortunately, that only made his temper tantrum more powerful, so Wilson, being the big, strong, tough guy he thinks he is, set his sights on an unsuspecting Filip Chytil who wasn't even looking in Wilson's direction, and hit him square in the body, and Chytil left the game injured. Unfortunately, I agree with the side of the hockey world that thinks this was a clean hit. Only by a hair, though. However, Tom Wilson in mid-October down 3-0 against a team outside of the Eastern Conference with plenty of time left to mount a comeback, hitting a guy who didn't even have the puck on his stick is... whatever. Obviously, I'm incredibly biased here, but I'm pissed. I just hope Chytil's okay. Jonathan Lekremaki was back in the lineup after sitting the last 2 games out as a healthy scratch. He was taking the spot of Brock Besser, who was out for personal reasons, and he looked good. Until he got injured. Teddy Blueger looked solid in this one. Here he is taking advantage of a great play by Evander Kane to score his first goal of the year. But then he got injured. 4-0 Canucks. MP3 was a defensive juggernaut all game. I love this guy. Artūrs Šilovs had a good showing. He was causing chaos in the Caps crease all morning. Victor Mancini dropped the gloves for the first time in his career, which led to Demko saying he had big boy balls, a phrase I'm surprised I didn't already have in my vocabulary, but I do now. Thanks, Demmer.
What'd you think of Mancini dropping the gloves?
Yeah, I mean, I just talked to him in the room there. It's a tough customer that he decided to drop him with, so took some big boy balls there.
And speaking of Demko, guess what? He's still a top 5 goalie in the NHL. And if that sounds wrong to you, fine. He's top 3. He made enough big saves to keep the Caps from tying the game, and then, thanks to a string of clutch blocks by Elias Pettersson in the final seconds, the Canucks hung on to defeat the defending President's Trophy winners by a score of 4-3. Now, on to Game 7 against the former Canuck and Vancouver fan favorite, Artūrs Šilovs and his new team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. For the second game in a row, Elias Pettersson and Conor Garland teamed up to open the scoring early, except this time it was Garland finishing off the play with a scrumptious little slap shot he blasted past the pads of Šilovs. And look at the pass Petey made on this play. Disgusting. 1-0 Canucks. Playing against his former team for the first time was Marcus MP3 Pettersson, and I thought he had a great game, especially on the penalty kill. Him and Tyler Myers are turning into quite the defensive duo. I love what I'm seeing from them. Myers played great in this one too. Vancouver's 4th-round pick from 2011, Joseph Labatt, was in the Canucks lineup for the first time in 3,130 days, and it was just nice to see him doing what they drafted him to do 14 years ago. The Calder Cup line was good again, but not quite good enough to score, which would normally be fine, but because Brock Besser, Teddy Blueger, Jonathan Lekremaki, Nils Höglander, and Filip Chytil were all unable to play in this game, the Canucks really could have used some depth scoring. Vancouver's forward group is so depleted right now. Besser's out for personal reasons, but he should be back soon. Blueger's out with a leg injury of some sort. It's unclear when he'll return. Lekremaki's out with a shoulder injury, and it's unclear when he'll return. Big Hog's still recovering from his surgery and won't be available until mid-December. And then there's Chytil, who we're all just hoping doesn't have another concussion. He's out indefinitely until further notice. So yeah, the Canucks are looking pretty thin up front right now. However, the silver lining when stuff like this happens is that you really get to see what your depth players have to offer. Guys like Max Sasson, Artūrs Bains, Aatu Räty, and Linus Karlsson are all going to be given way more ice time, and hopefully one or some of them are able to make the best of this opportunity and start turning some heads in the process. Unfortunately, that'll have to happen next game because Garland's opening minute slapper was the only one the Canucks managed to put behind their former goaltender. Meanwhile, on the other end of the ice, the Penguins were able to capitalize on virtually every scoring chance they had. The Canucks lost this one by a score of 5-1. Shout out to these geniuses for guessing the scores correctly. If you want a chance to be featured in a video, leave your score predictions for the next 4 Canucks games in the comments below, and if you get any right, I'll shout you out. Thank you to the Knuckheads who chose to support what I do by clicking the join button. Their names are scrolling by on the screen right now. Look how cool they look. Click the video on your screen right now to keep watching my content. New episode of the Knuckhead Podcast comes out on Friday. Thank you for watching. Bye.